President Trump is threatening to place new tariffs on the European Union. Mr. Trump tweeted in response to European tariffs on American goods Friday, saying, if these tariffs and barriers are not soon broken down and removed, we will be placing a 20% tariff on all of their cars coming into the U.S. He also floated the idea of placing a 25% tariff on the EU about a month ago. Alex Lawson is a senior reporter for international trade at Law 360, and he joins me now. Welcome to you, Alex.
Thank you, Elaine.
So the president's latest tweet about tariffs was directed at the EU, threatening to impose taxes on imported cars. Can you explain how that would affect the EU economy?
Yeah, well, it's already begun to affect the EU economy, even just the mere threat of a tariff, to say nothing of an actual tariff. Like you say, it would be a 20% levy on all their cars coming in. And for reference point, we have right now a 2.5% tariff on all cars that come in. And if you're an EU car seller, you figure this into your business strategy. You say, okay, we're selling to the United States. We have this relatively minor tariff, 2.5% to deal with. If at the drop of a hat that were to increase tenfold to 20%, it's going to be a huge problem for you. The door is essentially shut to you. And you started to see it already yesterday. The stocks of Volkswagen, Daimler, Fiat all went down after this tweet went out. Ironically enough, actually, so did many of the stock prices for American car companies, which is this is nominally supposed to be helping. But that kind of illustrates this thing you keep hearing about, how there really are no winners when you start to escalate trade barriers this way.
So the president has said in the past that he is doing this for national security reasons, but his tweet would seem to suggest otherwise. So why is he doing it? And is he breaking any kind of international law here?
That's a really important question. That's something that gets obfuscated a lot. So actually, what's going on is that the U.S. is in the process of conducting an investigation into it sounds weird to even say it aloud, but the national security threats posed by imported cars. It's not just from the European Union, it's for everybody. But a lot of people have said this is kind of an investigation in name only. They've maybe made up their mind and they're just kind of like playing nice for a little bit while that goes through. And that's what the president's tweet seemed to indicate. He was like, well, you know, it's going to be a 20% tariff on EU cars. He's using sort of a Cold War era law that, as you say, focuses on national security to justify trade restrictions. But all throughout this process, and this is the same law they used to impose steel and aluminum tariffs a few months back, all throughout this, there's not been a lot of talk about national security. It seems to be a direct sort of economic action. Now, what they have always argued is that economic security is linked to national security, but they're really kind of stretching the bounds of that argument, because you can say, yes, the defense industry needs steel and aluminum to make tanks and warships and things like that. What they might not need, though, is Honda Civics or things like that. It kind of begins to strain credulity there. Now, in terms of international law, there are a couple of disputes at the World Trade Organization that have already begun about this. However, they've never weighed in on the right of a country to invoke national security to justify trade barriers. They've never explained like the scope of that. And if they go very broad and say, yes, you can basically impose anything you want under the guise of national security, you can see them kind of emboldening other countries to move forward with like really strategic tariffs.
Interesting. Well, today is the 2-year anniversary, of course, of the Brexit vote. How will the UK respond here without the EU?
The UK has actually been able to stay above the fray on a lot of this for the most part. They're a very or rather, they're not very export reliant. They don't sell a lot of things abroad. They're very focused on imports. So they have been able to sort of evade a lot of these tariff squabbles. However, Trump and his trade team has been so kind of volatile that, you know, if you're the United Kingdom and, you know, you want to sort of make a trade deal with them, or you want to sort of draw your economies closer, you never know which way he's going to be pointing the gun on some random day. And basically, you know, the reasons for Brexit are pretty well established at this point, but if you get to a point where you're in a trade fight with the United States, I think you would rather do it with 27 of your closest friends than by yourself.
So it's interesting as well, the president has sort of framed this issue of tariffs as these are things that would help the American economy, but the BBC estimates they could lead to the loss of 195,000 U.S. jobs. Can you explain why?
Well, because the important thing to know there is it's not just cars that we impose these tariffs on, it's also car parts are under the umbrella of this investigation. And the supply chains for everything, but especially cars, are so global now. And there are car makers here who rely on parts coming in to make the cars at a a price that is affordable for their consumers. And if you shut that off, it can create a lot of chaos in the market. More so, though, even beyond this initial 195,000 figure that you keep reading about, if the EU were then to respond in kind with tariffs of their own on U.S. cars, I've seen estimates that job losses here could go as high as about 624,000. Now, these are economic models. They don't account for all kinds of variables, but the stakes are very clearly high here.
All right, a lot to watch. Alex Lawson, thank you so much for stopping by us.
Thanks.